Hi girls, I'm sending you this lesson. We're doing things in a recorded way now for the time being. That might change later. I know from your emails to me that you've been struggling a little bit with how to write academic essays. So this lesson is all about how to get you more confident in doing that. I'm going to take you through some steps of the first part. So today will be all about writing introductions, and we're going to take things one step at a time, talking you through and building your confidence up so that by the end of today, by the end of this lesson, you'll feel much, much better about how to write academically with particular attention to constructing a superb scholarly introduction. I'm just going to share my screen now so you will see a much smaller version of myself, which you don't need to worry about. Hopefully we'll be able to continue. I'd like to invite you to do your do now. I'm going to stick to pretty much the routines that we use in lessons. So I'm going to ask you to, after I've read the question, to go ahead and pause your video while you answer the do now question. So the question is this: which part of an essay should synthesize ideas together without repeating them? I'll say that one more time. Which part of an essay should synthesize ideas together without repeating them? In fact, don't pause. We're not going to do it like that. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a timer on the screen now. So you've got about a minute to answer that question. On your do now, off you go. Last few seconds. And 3, 2, 1. Okay. Hopefully, thinking back to even when you first started learning about essays in the lower school, you will know that the answer to that question is a conclusion. A conclusion is meant to synthesize ideas in an essay without repeating them. The next bit is just so you're prepared really with what you need for this lesson. I think it's helpful to have a copy of the play of Streetcar. There'll be moments when I pause or I ask you to pause the recording, and you might want to just flip back to the play, maybe also to some of the notes that you've got in the play. If you've got those in a separate place, you might want those too. You'll need a pen for writing, and also perhaps an annotation pen in a vibrant colour that you can use on the Streetcar text itself. We won't be doing as much of that today, but have it anyway. I've also sent you on Show My Homework in preparation for this, a PowerPoint that has a slide on it that I'd like you to write some of your answers on, which you're going to submit. So if you can have that open on a tab, and also some paper or an exercise book that you can write on as well. If you haven't got any of those things, if you want to just pause the video and go and get yourself sorted, and then I shall move on. I'm just going to show you that because that's the tab that you should have open and ready to type some of your answers into, and I invite you to do that at certain points of this lesson. So I'm going to go back one. So you'll be familiar with this slide. It's in the first lesson that I sent you, the one that you fed back to me that you're having a little bit of trouble with. Your essay question is an exam question. I'm just going to read it to you. Discuss the view that a streetcar named Desire is a play concerned with the conflict of the old and the new, and that this conflict is expressed through the battle between Stanley and Blanche. And then what follows is a series of bullet points that I thought would help you to get your head around constructing the essay. Now, of course, we're having to take a few steps back because you fed back to me that you're having trouble just writing academically in the first place. And so we're going to take it some small steps at a time. And what we're going to focus on today is that first bullet point, because that's what's going to help you to write an excellent introduction. So that's what we're all about today, writing an excellent scholarly introduction. And in order to do that, before, we're going to have to learn how to unpack a question so that the introduction and everything else that follows is focused and relevant, because we've all written answers to exam questions that in the end have had nothing to do with the question itself. So we must make sure that we don't fall down that trap, because that's a common misconception, a common fluency error. Okay, so we are thinking about this question. I'm going to read it once more. Discuss the view that a streetcar named Desire is a play concerned with the conflict of the old and the new, and that this conflict is expressed through the battle between Stanley and Blanche. So the question I want you to think about, first of all, in helping you to write an excellent introduction, is to help you unpack the question. What is the central concept, the main literary idea in the question? This is a question that you're going to have to ask yourself every time you do an essay, whether that's in preparation for the exam or actually in an exam itself. You're going to have to make sure that you understand that question really, really well. So what I'm going to do at the start is to talk you through what I would do as a student if I had to deal with this question. The first thing that I would ask you to do is to think about, well, what's the key word or keywords or phrase in this question? We're talking about the bullseye and that target. Often I will ask you in the exam to underline that in a question. Today I'm going to ask you to just note it down in your exercise book or in your notepad. Once you've worked out what the keyword, keywords or phrases are, the next thing you're going to have to do, especially as we're taking these small baby steps to understand what it takes to write a really good academic essay, once you know what those keywords are, you're going to have to stop and think. You're going to have a stop and a think. And then the next best thing to do when you stop and think about those keywords is to try to rephrase the questions in your own words. So here, if you like, is the tangly bit of, this is the question, it's all knotty, and I'm going to unravel it by putting it into my own words so I know exactly what to do. Now, as you become more and more confident as an English scholar, you may not necessarily have to do all of this, but there may be a time if you have a particularly difficult question in an exam where you have to go back to this method. So knowing it is very, very helpful. But the general idea is that once you've learned how to do this, it will become second nature. So I'm going to talk you through now how I would think if I was a student in the exam. Before I do that, I'm going to ask you to have a little bit of a bash at it and see what you've come up with. So again, I'm going to show you the stopwatch, and I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to have a go. first of all, the first step actually is going to be 1 minute, and that is just to write down the key words of the question. And I'd like you to do that, go back a little bit. I'd like you to do that on this open tab here where it says central concept. So I'd like you to write the key words right there, okay? So let me just get those back up for you. I'm going to give you 1 minute, and you lift those words from the questions. You're not changing them, you're just picking them out and you're writing them down next to central concept. 1 minute, off you go. A few more seconds to go, picking out the keywords. Hands down. Now I'm going to move very swiftly on to the next bit, which is also going to be timed. I'm going to give you some time to think, but also to write down now in your own words, exactly in the same place. So you've written down some keywords, but also in the same place where those dotted lines are. Can you please try to reword the question in your own words so it captures everything that you think the question is asking you to do? So it's very much like those paraphrases that I've asked you to do in the past when we've had a really thorny passage in a text. What I'd like you to do is to think of the question as a thorny passage, and I would like you to put it in your own words. So this time, I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, and that will include some stopping and thinking time. So you might want to write a little bit, and then you might want to just read over and reflect. You don't need to be writing for the full 3 minutes. You're about halfway through. Last few seconds, so finishing up. And stop. Okay, so as promised, this is how I would think my way through it if I was a student. I'm looking at this question and I'm seeing that there's a word that's being repeated. It's probably the key word here, and you've probably gathered yourself that it's the word conflict. It appears twice. And when I look at that word, the first time it's mentioned, it's talking about conflict of the old and of the new. And then it appears again. And so I have to think about, okay, why is it appearing again? Well, I think what's happening here is it's explaining that there are two characters perhaps that represent that conflict of the old and the new. So what we've got here is probably, if I was writing in my on my slide, I would be writing the word conflict between the old and the new, and also between Stanley and Blanche. When it comes to rephrasing it, and I've got some knowledge of that in my lesson that I've done on historical context. I know that old and new relates to the antebellum world, pre-Civil War, where the values of the Deep South and the slave-owning families, the old aristocracy, if you like, of America were fading as a set of values, and the new values of the American dream, as depicted in New Orleans and its very diverse, almost classless culture, were beginning to rise. So what I'd like you to do is to have a look. I hope you can see that. Or at my version. So I've got their conflict of old and new worlds, battle between Stanley and Blanche. Those are my lifted words, if you like, the central concept of the question. Then when it comes for me to think about a thesis, of course, is the main theme of the composition, what my academic essay is going to explore. And I'm thinking that you could have maybe got something like this down. So something you could have written is, Williams is depicting a time after World War II when America was changing in its values, away from the values of the Old South with its romantic beliefs grounded in family ancestry and class, to the new world of urban diversity and liberal values and the American dream of social mobility for all. And then I wanted to also make sure that I captured that last bit of the question that linked it to Stanley and Blanche's characters. And so I've also got this sentence there, which you could have had something like this: these perspectives clash, most especially in the characters of Stanley and Blanche, who do not understand each other's values or attitudes. I think what you could do now is to go ahead and pause the video and just add to, amend, or improve anything that you have in your answer that you think you could use from this model answer. Okay, so hopefully you've done that now, and we're going to move on. I'm going to just talk to you about essays in general before I go back into thinking about what an introduction does. When you first learnt about essays, probably way back in year 7, we used the analogy of an essay being like a human body. Got a head, main part of you, and then your feet. And what we were trying to do there was to explain to you that an introduction and a conclusion are much smaller in proportion to the main part of an essay, just like your head and your feet. They're very important. What would a body be without them? But they are much smaller in proportion to the rest of you. But now I know that you are, as English scholars, trying to write more academically sophisticated essays. And so I want you to start thinking about essays as if they were journeys. And that's what this image is all about. So if you see here, this path reflecting the journey that an essay takes you on. The start of the journey here is what we're focused on today, which is the introduction. And really what you want to do at the start of a journey is to give an outline and a direction for where your explorations are going to be headed. You don't want to say everything about every destination that you're going to stop at, but you want to give a general outline of the area that you plan to explore. Then, as you begin your main body, and there may be several parts, this one's only got 2 points, but you'd probably have about 3 paragraphs at least in your main body, and you'd want to see those as destinations that you stop at and you explore. So you're going to explore some ideas there and say what you found when you get to that point, and then when you get to another point. We imagine maybe there'd be another point there in an A-level essay as well. And then you get to the end, which would be your conclusion. We are going to be doing essays on all of these parts, but I will say now that your conclusion, especially when it comes to A-level academic writing, is probably not as conclusive as the conclusions you used to write. When you write an academic essay for A-level, your conclusions are just going to more or less say, look, this is where I've got to on my journey. I'm not able to be as conclusive sometimes as I'd like to be, but I can tell you what I've found, where I've got to, and where I am on this journey. And it's going to synthesize everything that you've explored without repeating, and it's going to say what you have drawn from that journey that you've been on. So hopefully that's a helpful way of thinking about a high-level academic essay. Now let's have a little bit more of a closer look at what I really want to get our teeth in today, which is writing an excellent scholarly introduction. A scholarly introduction is made up of 3 parts: a general statement, usually 1 sentence, a specific statement, also 1 sentence, and a thesis statement that could perhaps be anything from 1 to 3 sentences. Underneath here, I've just got some visual images of what each of these components might look like if you were going to make an image of them. So when you write your general statement, what you're saying is, this is the area, this is the general area of exploration that I'm in. Then a specific statement takes that general area and it says, within that general area, we are looking at this particular example. And here you can see this particular tree. It's slightly darker in colour than the other ones. Then your thesis statement, which as you can see is pointing to the branch of that tree, will start to develop a particular idea about that example. It will start to say, well, here's an interesting thing about this specific example that I've decided to explore. There's a particular branch that is of interest, and it's got some questions, some controversies, some debate, some interesting things that I would like to take a closer look at and explore. And again, that might be 2 or 3 sentences. So what I'm going to do now is to try and model an answer for you. Obviously, I don't want to model the one that you are having to write now as your assessment. It's a temptation to copy exactly what I've written would be too much. So I'm going to be working on another question, but I want to draw out the principles from it, and you're going to try to copy them with your question, which is the one on conflict of the old and new world, particularly exemplified in the relationship and the characters of Blanche and Stanley. So the question that I'm looking at is this one. It's a bit shorter. At its heart, this play is a hymn of praise to the American dream. Examine this view of a streetcar named Desire. So I've just gone through very quickly the same steps that we've just gone through. I've decided that the key words of the question, the central concept, is the American dream. And I have paraphrased the question so that I understand it properly for myself. And my paraphrase is this: William's main intention in writing Streetcar was to show that the American dream, with its values of social rewards for hard work, a classless society, and an open meritocracy, is something to be proud of. A meritocracy is this idea that if you work hard, then there are no social barriers to stop you from rising socially and being rewarded. So that's what I think, in my own words, the question is asking me to do. So now I understood the question, I've unpacked it, I know what I'm writing about, I'm not going to go off topic. I'm now turning my attention to the introduction, and I know that the first sentence that I've got to write in my introduction is a general statement. Here's an example of a general statement that will answer this question and that I can write in my introduction to this question. American playwrights often explore the failings of the American dream. So I've got a quick check for understanding. You should just read that sentence to yourself again. And then I want you to have a go at deciding what this general statement is doing. What's its purpose? Is it A, explaining the concept? Is it B, giving an example of the concept? Is it C, outlining the overall idea? Or is it D, using the key words? You can just pause the video, make a decision, A, B, C, or D. And pause when you're ready. Okay, so if I move along, hopefully you've got that what a general statement tries to do is it outlines the overall idea. If you remember, this is our picture of the general area. If you like, there's another one here, an outline of a person. So it's outlining the general area, and the general area is the American dream. And what I've said as a general outline about it is that American playwrights like to explore the American dream as something that fails. What I'd like you to do now is to pause the video again, and this time take a few minutes, as long as you need, to write a general statement, one sentence please, that explores the general overall idea of conflict between the old and the new world in relation to your question. Off you go. Now that you've done that, let's have a look at the second sentence that you'd be writing in an introduction. All of this here is the same. It's my question. It's my working out of the question. And here we've got the next sentence I'd write, which is the specific statement. That's what follows on from a general statement. Here's my specific statement in answer to this question. This has produced a wealth of modern tragedies, like Streetcar, depicting the lives of characters who battle emotional and social adversity. Have a look at that question again. Think about it. And the question I'd like you to ask yourself is, what is the specific statement doing here? Is it A, explaining the concept? Is it B, giving an example of the concept? Is it C, suggesting an overall idea? Or is it D, using the keywords? Pause the video once you've made a choice and then unpause it. So hopefully you've decided that it's B, given an example of the concept. You can see here is somebody giving an example in their talk. And if you remember from my previous slide, this is where once you've said what the general area is, you point to a specific example in that general area and you explain why it's relevant. You see how that sentence there is saying, generally when we talk about the failings of the American dream, which playwrights like to write about, they produce modern tragedies. Streetcar is one of them, and it depicts the lives of characters who are battling emotional and social adversity within the American dream. So what I've done there is I've said the general area is the American dream and why it fails. Streetcar is an example of the American dream failing because the characters are battling adversity. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's social. So again, I'd like you to pause the video for as long as you need, a few minutes, and I'd like you now to write a sentence, just one sentence that's a specific statement that will follow on from your general statement to answer the question that you're answering about the conflict between the old and the new in Streetcar. Off you go. Okay, hope it's going all right. Let's move on to the last part of your introduction. This is the thesis statement. This is the one where it could be that you manage to get it all out in one sentence, but sometimes it takes a little bit more than that, 2 or 3. With my question on the American dream, here's the sentence that I've come up with as my thesis statement. In Streetcar, various characters and events are presented to audiences who are invited to judge why some people survive, even thrive in American society, and others seem destined for destruction. Again, I'm going to ask you if you can think hard, pause, think hard about that sentence, reread it, and then ask yourself, what is the thesis statement doing here? It's one of these 4 things. Is it A, explaining the concept? Is it B, developing an idea about a particular example? Is it C, drawing out a controversy? Or is it D, using the key words? Pause, pick a letter, and unpause. Let's see how you did with this one. The answer is that a thesis statement develops an idea about a particular example. Our example is Streetcar. Move back to this image again. So again, our general idea in my question is the American dream. The specific example is Streetcar as a modern tragedy because there's characters in it that are battling to achieve the American dream and battling emotional and social adversity. But an idea connected to this idea of battling emotional and social adversity is that some characters win that fight, they survive, they thrive in the battle, but others don't do so well and they're destined for destruction. It seems that they're doomed characters, and I think we all know which characters are. So the thesis statement is making a specific reference to the example in hand. For us, it's Streetcar. Now, it's your turn, but remember your general area is conflict in the old and new world, specifically to do with Streetcar and how it presents that conflict. And then now your thesis statement is going to say how that conflict plays out in Streetcar. Pause the video and you're going to need to come up with between 1 to 3, no more than 3 sentences that develop an idea about Streetcar depicting the old and the new world in conflict. Press the pause button and have a go. Okay. So hopefully now you've got between 3 to 5 sentences that you have drafted that are shaping up to be a good introduction. What I'd like you to do between this lesson and next lesson is to submit on Show My Homework this template that you've written on with your general statement, your specific statement, your thesis statement, also your unpacking of the question. There's a date by which you need to do that, so you can do it by that date. I'm going to really look forward to reading them and having a look at them. And then what we're going to do next lesson, certainly at the start, as part of our Do Now, is, even if they're brilliant, we're going to see if we can improve them. We're going to look at what it takes to make these introductions super scholarly introductions. So just to repeat, you're going to email me your submissions on this template that I provided on Show My Homework. I'm going to read them and I'm going to note down some feedback that I want to give you, and then we're going to look at improving them together in class, perhaps also helping each other to improve as well. So I might take some sound bites from one or two. And then once we've done that, hopefully you'll see that your introduction, this is what my introduction looked like. So when you're happy with your improved version, you can write it up so that it looks like an introduction. Mine's 3 sentences here. Yours could be anything up to 5. Try not to let it be any more than that. So once we've improved on it, got something together like this, then we're going to move into the main part of the lesson, next lesson, and we're going to take a look at how to write an excellent scholarly main body paragraph. We're going to look at how to write crisp, beautiful claims, i.e. topic sentences that begin paragraphs that mark the points of your journey, and how to expand on them with supporting details, looking at the AOs that you need to consider and address to write a really good English literature A-level essay. So I hope that was helpful, girls. We're going to work as a team next lesson to help each other improve our introductions, and then we're going to try something new with writing a main body. I hope this helped you. I hope this made you feel like you can do it, because you can do it, and I'll see you next time.